Not sure this is on. Is this on? I don't think it's on. Is this on? Yes, now it's on. They say the lights are bright on Broadway, but these are really, wow. So I can't see you guys, I'm blind. But hello, everyone. Please take your seats. We are about to get started. And if you keep chattering, I'm just going to have to try to drown you out. Please find your seats. You know, if you do have side conversations, we can often hear you on stage, so we will bring you into the experience. Welcome. I'm Matt Herper. I'm the editorial director of events here at STAT. Thank you for being here, and welcome to our annual STAT at JPM live event. I hope you all know, but this is STAT's 10th anniversary. And it's been remarkable to see this publication, starting before I got here, pursuing coverage of the biggest medical breakthroughs of the past decade and the impact of both its laudatory coverage and our investigations. You'll see nods to our 10-year anniversary throughout this event as we wrap up our anniversary celebrations here during biotech's biggest week. This is our 6th STAT at JPM, so I hope a lot of you do know who STAT is. But in case you don't, you should receive a little postcard at check-in with some information about STAT, including a special STAT Plus subscription offer exclusively for STAT at JPM attendees. If you're not already a subscriber, I encourage you to join. You'll gain unlimited access to our daily biotech and pharma coverage, award-winning investigations, and subscriber-only newsletters, importantly including my friend Adam Feuerstein's biotech scorecard. Don't miss out. Each year, this event gets better and better, and this year is no different. Thanks for bringing it in and choosing to spend this JPM evening with us. We have an exciting program lined up for all of you, including a panel of former FDA officials, a discussion about the future of biotech led by Adam, and, of course, some great sponsored sessions in between. On that note, a big thank you to our presenting sponsor, Cencora, and our gold sponsor, Genentech. And with that, we're ready to get started. Here to join me for our first editorial session of the evening, please welcome to the stage Yvonne Greenstreet, Chief Executive Officer of Alnylam Pharmaceuticals.
Good evening, everybody. What a crowd. Well done to Matt for settling everybody down before the panel.
Practice. But really, they're here to see you. So Yvonne joined Alnylam in 2016. She became CEO in January 2022. The stock, since people at JP Morgan care about things like that here, has more than doubled. And the company now has a market capitalization of about $50 billion. And today, it announced a plan for the next 5 years that aims to grow the company even more. So I wanted to start there. Do you want to give a quick outline of what Alnylam 2030 means?
Absolutely. Look, at Alnylam, we have a 15-year history of setting ourselves 5-year goals. And I'm pleased to say that over the last 15 years, we've met or exceeded every single set of 5-year goals. And our last set of 5-year goals, which we call Peter Fifth by 25, we're able to declare victory on at this conference this morning. And in fact, we exceeded those goals. We delivered 6 new medicines to patients. We grew revenue CAGR in excess of what we had plan for, 50% CAGR over the period, which I think is absolutely phenomenal. And, we are now poised for profitability. And so I think we're one of those unusual biopharma companies who've been able to build a flagship franchise, grow revenues, as well as having a very rich clinical pipeline with some very exciting programs and achieving profitability. So we couldn't be more excited about where the company is. And this has given us a real foundation for building as we look towards our NILM 2030. There's some key elements of what we plan to do over the next 5 years. And it's very important that we set these goals because it really aligns the company. It gives us focus, it gives us accountability, and as I said, we generally deliver what we set out to do. So the main elements of our NILM 2030 goals are firstly around our TTR franchise. We're incredibly pleased with how that business is growing, and we intend to be the leaders.
And we should explain this business. I mean, this is both a much more competitive and a much bigger business than I think we initially thought about it as when we first started hearing about this program. Let's just, a quick explanation of what TTR is in case, I know it's a biotech audience.
Yeah, they know what TTR is. I mean, it's deposition of amyloid in a number of tissues, primarily the heart and the nerves, and it's a rapidly progressive and debilitating disease, and we've been able to develop an RNAi therapeutic that knocks down TTR, and we've been able to demonstrate that in what was a landmark study called the HELIOS-B study, and we got approval last year, and the launch has gone phenomenally well. In fact, it's been a breakout launch, and we delivered a really good performance in 2025, and I'll talk about that more, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But we should probably just finish off.
No, finish the goals. I just wanted to underline the point.
Yeah. So TTR, very important, and we'll be leaders. The second is around growing through innovation, and we intend to bring another 2 or more transformative blockbuster medicines to patients within the time frame, and we're very focused on moving forward our rich clinical pipeline. We're the sort of company, because we're innovation-driven company, we will be reinvesting significant proportion of our revenues, 30% of our revenues, in R&D. I think that's important for driving long-term value creation. And we're also going to have to scale the company with all these opportunities, and we're going to scale the company in a disciplined way that maintains our entrepreneurial culture. And to that end, we've planned that we will be able to deliver, going forward, 25% revenue CAGR over the period, as well as delivering pretty impressive operating margins. So the unusual thing about these goals is that you'll find that they're pretty specific, actually, for a biotech company in terms of setting long-term goals.
Meaning that the degree to which you're setting at 25?
The specificity of what we're laying out that we're going to do, because it holds us accountable. It's transparent, and sharing our plans with the ecosystem, but also it really drives accountability in the organization.
So let's talk a little bit about the TTR market. So it's grown so fast that I think there's some nervousness. Little bit today, you missed slightly, 3%, which is very tiny, but is and I think what that exposed for some people I've spoken to is not so much about this quarter, but worrying about how does this play out over the next year, over the next 2 years? I mean, every drug misses a quarter occasionally. Give an explanation of how you think the next year, the next 5 years plays out for this market, what it means for you to be the leading
So, look, we had a phenomenal 2025, and I'd say that the launch of Amvuttra for patients with cardiomyopathy TTR, it was actually a breakout launch, no doubt about it. We were able to double TTR revenues in just 1 year, and we're incredibly proud of what we've achieved. Also, the business fundamentals are incredibly strong in terms of, how physicians and payers and patients are responding to the very compelling clinical profile and the value proposition that we have in terms of access. We really haven't seen any access headwinds. We're in a large, growing and underserved market. So we couldn't be more excited about how we're positioned for the future. And yeah, as you said, there's always variability quarter on quarter. But as a marker of our conviction in the opportunity that we have in our hands for 2026, we actually put out guidance also at this conference. And, we're guiding to $4.4 to $4.7 billion of TTR revenue.
Close to doubling again.
That's an 83% kind of growth at the midpoint. And I think that indicates our confidence in the business that we're building, our confidence in Amvuttra's profile. We can't wait to come back next year and tell you all how we did.
Let's talk a little bit more broadly about RNAi as a technology, as a profile. I mean, it's amazing to see a drug this big emerging out of this technology, and it's not the only one that's emerged, particularly from Alnylam. What makes this technology special, and what else do you think you'll be able to do with it?
Yeah, look, we've pioneered what we call the RNAi revolution. Essentially, we've taken Nobel Prize-winning science, and we have delivered 6 medicines in a fairly short order, as we've just discussed, for some very important diseases. So we think that RNAi is going to be a generational technology. You've got small molecules, you've got antibodies, and you've got RNAi. And what is, I think, so exciting about the opportunities ahead of us with RNAi is that actually, it's a naturally occurring mechanism in every single tissue in the body. And so what this means is that if you're able to effect delivery of your siRNA into a tissue, you can open up a range of opportunities. Obviously, the first tissue that we cracked was getting into the liver. And that's opened up a large number of opportunities that we've been progressing. As we think about our 2030 strategy, we intend to be in 10 major tissues by 2030. And really what this does is act as a value multiplier for the company. Because if you open up a tissue, you open up a new set of genetic targets, a new set of diseases that you can address, and build, I think, what is going to be a technology that has outsized impact on human health.
Let's talk about not the next tissues, but the ones you have now, because there's some big risks there, some big swings. And particularly what jumps out to me when I look at your pipeline are the bets in Huntington's and Alzheimer's. These are not diseases that have been kind to drug developers. They're probably among the toughest. Why are these the right targets, and how are you going to prosecute them?
So look, we're stepping into this space with a lot of conviction. It's a huge unmet medical need, and we believe that we have in our hands a technology that can address some of the most devastating diseases on the planet, and we feel an accountability to move forward in this direction. What we've been able to deliver with our CNS platform is actually getting our siRNAs into the CNS, effecting durable knockdown, broad biodistribution, and actually safety. And we're now progressing a number of different programs, some really important diseases. One disease called cerebral amyloid angiopathy, which is caused by the deposition of amyloid in the cerebral vasculature. If we're able to switch off the production of amyloid, we believe that we're going to have an impact on clinical outcomes for these patients. And so we're moving forward swiftly with that program. We're now in phase 2. We're also very excited about Huntington's disease. I mean, I don't know any of you who know any Huntington's patients is one of the most terrible diseases that I've you know, encountered. I mean, it's like having ALS, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's all rolled into one, and these patients really have very little hope. And we have a program that has a unique mechanism of action that we believe is going to have a substantial impact on the disease. It's now in phase 1. And I tell you, if we're able to impact the progression of this disease in patients with Huntington's, it'll be a huge contribution to medicine and to patients. So we're moving these forward expeditiously. And I think, we've done the difficult bit, which is getting into CNS. And so now the opportunity is to be able to demonstrate clinical impact on some of these devastating diseases.
So we should have a mic runner out there somewhere in the audience. If you have a question, try to raise your hand, and if there is someone running with a mic, just chime in because I can't see. So let's go back to TTR a little bit more and talk mechanism, because there are several drugs that are working in this space, and there are two kind of flavors, right? You're silencing the gene, and then there are also drugs that work more on the protein. Explain why you think it's an advantage, well, to be you, to have drugs that work in the way that yours do.
So we believe that knocking down TTR amyloid at its source is the right way to address the disease. It switches off the production of what is a disease-causing protein. And if you look at the phase 3 results that we're able to deliver in a landmark study, HELIOS-B, I mean, we delivered impact on mortality, profound impact on how patients feel, how they function, progression of a number of cardiovascular markers showing actually improvement in disease. And all this is delivered in a quarterly subcutaneous regimen, which means that when physicians prescribe the drug, they know that patients are going to get it. So real outsized outcomes. And I think we have demonstrated that this profile is resonating kind of incredibly well. In just 3 quarters, we're approaching parity with tafamidis, which is one of the silencers.
That's the Pfizer silencer.
That's the Pfizer stabilizer. In terms of new patient starts, and that's an incredible result in just 3 quarters. Really beginning to challenge a standard of care that has been around for several years.
So, but tafamidis will eventually go generic. How do you think about combination here, both with Amvuttra but with your follow-on compound as well?
That's a really good question. When we looked at the opportunity for combination, our view was that there was going to be very little combination use before the tafamidis loss of exclusivity, really because you're talking about administering 2 pretty expensive medicines. Interesting enough, there has been some combination use. I think physicians have been prepared to, when they have a patient that's progressing on a stabilizer like tafamidis, they've either got the option to switch that patient to an orthogonal mechanism of action, like the TTR knockdown strategy that we have with Amvuttra, or prescribe in combination. We're seeing a little bit of combination use. When tafamidis goes off patent, I think we will see combination use really pick up, and we feel very well positioned in that scenario because our HELIOS-B study showed that Amvuttra was effective not just as monotherapy, but actually in combination with tafamidis. So we're labeled for combination use.
Matt, we have a question back here.
Oh, great. Julie, I can't see it all.
Could you stand up and maybe say who you are?
Hi, Riley Poblete.
Please state your name and then your question quickly.
Riley Poblete with Gensler. Just quick question on when you looked at your 5-year plan, how did the regulatory impacts and the environment today affect your guys' charting of your plan?
Yeah, no, look, that's a really good question. I mean, we've been fortunate to actually, have been able to deliver the approval of Amvuttra with the HELIOS-B study. We've had a number of, interactions with the FDA and other regulatory authorities over the last year or so, and everything's, moving as we would like it to do. That being said, we all know that there's, some turmoil, in the FDA in terms of turnover, etc. But we're hopeful. We're hopeful that there'll be a continued focus on on regulators providing high quality assessments and moving innovation when it meets the bar to approval.
How worried are you about not only the regulatory environment, but the pricing environment? I mean, a lot of stuff is up in the air. A lot of things that I think we took for granted a few years ago seemed like they could change in all sorts of directions. Is it net good? Is it net bad? And given that you just made promises about the next 5 years, how do you think about this uncertainty?
Yeah, no, so when we think about 5-year outlook, clearly we have some assumptions about how we think the business is going to unfold and how the environment's going to unfold. I think as a company, we're pretty well positioned to weather many of those risks, and are driven by the opportunity that we have to build what we think is going to be a remarkable company. We have a lot of momentum right now, and we're going to seize the opportunity of that momentum to continue to build the business for the foreseeable future.
So, looking back over your time at Alnylam so far, what has surprised you the most about what would have surprised you when you joined that you could tell yourself now? What's changed the most?
I think what's changed, I think we've touched on some of this already, but I did not imagine that as I took on the CEO role that I would be entering the period of uncertainty that we currently are. I mean, there's a lot, both from a geopolitical perspective, from a macro perspective, and I feel really pleased that we're able to move forward our business, even in uncertain times. But I don't think that would be quite this degree of.
Thought maybe it'd be easier, smoother,
I thought
more
it may
predictable.
be a little bit more predictable, but that's not how the world works. And you find yourself leading, in the period of time where you're the CEO, and it's your job to manage through those uncertainties.
So, very quickly, is there another message that you'd like to get across? Is there a quick thing that you think people get wrong about Alnylam that you'd like to correct? Do people not? What misconception does the world out there have about you?
I think it's probably, around the scale of the opportunity that we can deliver. I think people have seen what we've done with TTR and the rest of our portfolio. They've seen what we're building in the pipeline, but I don't think there's the full understanding of really the magnitude of the potential that we have, both to impact human health, but also to build an amazing business. We're in the early innings of the RNAi revolution, and there's so much more ahead of us. And we truly believe in the company that actually the best is yet to come.
All right, thank you very much. So thank you, Yvonne, for that great conversation. Up next, for a session with our presenting sponsor, please welcome to the stage Lisa Harrison, SVP and President, Specialty Distribution and Solutions at Cencora; Beth Mitchell, Vice President, U.S. Public Policy and Advocacy at Cencora; and to moderate, David Senior, Senior Vice President, Biopharma Intelligence at Cencora. Thanks again to all of you for being here.
Ready? Great.
Okay, I didn't realize Matt was going to introduce us, so that's great that he already took care of that. So it's great to be here with all of you tonight, and it's been a great week so far for those of you who attended many meetings and the conference today. I had a great time there today, and here looking forward to the time with my colleagues from Cencora. So Cencora, for those of you who don't know who we are, we're a global pharmaceutical solutions and wholesale business, providing innovative partnerships with providers, pharmacies, and manufacturers, bringing products to life. So what exactly does that mean? I was thinking about that today as I was sitting through many of the presentations by manufacturers at the conference, and it was such an inspiring day. It was really exciting hearing about products that are launched, helping patients today, as well as what's in the pipelines going forward. But it was interesting. The thing that struck me was all of the talk was about products launch and the launch dates and the projected launch date. And you think about what comes after that launch date, and products actually have to get in the hands of providers, in pharmacies, and ultimately into patients' hands. And so, the role that Cencora plays is paramount to ensuring that patients have access to those products in their local community on time and as affordable and as accessible as possible. So we're going to talk for just a few minutes here about some of the things that Cencora does. Lisa, who leads our specialty distribution and solutions business, will talk about our solutions with our providers and what Cencora does. Beth, who leads our U.S. public policy and advocacy, will talk about some of the things our Washington team does to advocate for solutions that ensure accessibility and affordability for patients. So Lisa, I'm going to hand it to you. Maybe just give an overview of what you do and what your customers do.
Sure. So just as David said, it's important to remember that sort of our core function is to ensure that specialty providers have access to these complex therapies no matter where they are. So if they're in rural Georgia or if they're in Manhattan, we're able to get those therapies to them in one day. So that the patients who are in those communities have access to cutting-edge therapies. In addition to that, we provide an enormous amount of support with services and solutions for our network of specialty providers. So one example of that would be our inventory management solutions. We provide inventory management for therapeutic area specific providers. And with that, we are able to leverage reporting, we're able to leverage insights to help them understand what just-in-time inventory is, so that when that patient shows up to the clinic, they have the right therapy there for that patient without the capital burden of having a week or a month of product on hand. And so those solutions are integrated into their workflows within the clinics. We also work with our pharmaceutical partners to provide education. So just as David talked about the excitement around these new therapies, cutting-edge therapies coming to market, we know that for specialty providers, keeping up with that innovation and making sure that they are on the cutting edge with those therapies coming to market is so critically important. So we also play a role in ensuring that they're receiving the education they need so that no matter, again, where they are, those patients are getting access to that care.
So Lisa, we've been at this a long time in terms of developing solutions, but in the last couple of years, Cencora has been active in investing in management services organizations. Can you talk a little bit about what that is? What does that mean? And
Sure.
why has Cencora made these investments to deepen our partnership with the providers?
So Cencora has always been focused on ensuring that providers have access to the services they need to provide the highest quality patient care. And that's exactly what MSOs do. It aligns a provider to a partner that will come in and help them navigate this challenging, complex environment where they are seeing more and more administrative burdens as well. And an MSO is very well positioned to come in and to help create efficiencies in that back office work and allow the provider to spend more time focused on clinical care, while also allowing those providers to maintain their clinical autonomy. It's truly just something that we see a need for more and more as there's more administrative burden on providers. We're also, David, seeing MSOs help to bring clinical trial access. So working alongside manufacturer partners and providers to bring access for clinical trials all across their networks, RWE, et cetera, helping these providers to bring radioligand therapies, bispecifics, cell and gene. They create playbooks to ensure that all of the practices within the networks are able to bring that to the patients in their communities.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. I'm going to turn to Beth. Beth, if you can talk about the activities of Cencora in Washington to ensure accessibility and affordability in the policy realm.
Thanks, David. Happy to, and good evening, everyone. So my role is to lead our advocacy public policy efforts in Washington, D.C. and across the states. And Cencora has a long history of advocating for policies to ensure affordable and accessible access to healthcare, especially in the specialty community-based setting. There are a lot of complexities in healthcare. It's a very complex industry, and navigating the policymaking process in Washington, D.C. is also very complex. At any point, we have changing positions. People are changing into different roles within the healthcare ecosystem from a policymaking perspective. We have over 400 members of Congress, 100 U.S. senators, thousands of White House administration and agency officials at the federal level, in addition to thousands of state lawmakers, governors, and so forth. And many, if not most, of those elected officials do not have a healthcare background. They don't understand the complexities of what it takes to bring an innovative new therapy to market, what it takes to get that specialty medication safely and efficiently to the site of care, to the pharmacy, the physician practice, the hospital. And all of that is so important to be actively involved in the lawmaking process so that they can understand who Cencora is, what we do, and what our perspective is on the public policy that's being debated or written. And so that's really a huge part of my role, and I get to work with leaders like both of you and many of our experts across the enterprise to help be actively engaged with lawmakers as they're writing legislation, regulation, coming up with new policy ideas. And I think it's important that we do, as Cencora, have that involvement in the policy-making process, because there's often unintended consequences or unnecessary burden, administrative burden of policies that lawmakers may not have thought of, especially if they don't have that inside perspective on how healthcare works, how and what it takes to get these innovative therapies from the manufacturer to our distribution centers, to the communities where patients are living and working. And so we do have a unique perspective as Cencora, and we're actively involved in educating lawmakers as they're coming up with legislation. This is essentially important, especially important because Medicare is a critical payer for many of these innovative therapies that are coming to market. And how pharmaceuticals are priced and reimbursed, especially in the specialty community setting, is so important. And there's a lot of new legislation, new laws that have taken place. And we work very closely with our industry partners, such as in the distribution industry, as well as with our specialty community physicians and the groups that they're a part of, to share our story. So those are some examples of the work that we do in Washington.
Great. Thank you, Beth. So we're almost out of time, so I'll just close on following up with what Beth talked about, which is our role, what we've been doing. We've announced $1 billion of investments to assure that we support supply chain resilience, ensure that those drugs do get to the patients on time, and we're playing our role to ensure that our part, along with all of you, to create healthier futures. So thank you for your time today, and we'll pass it to the next speakers.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much to Sankora. And I do have a message for the folks in the back. We can hear you. But up next, we'll hear from two of biotech's top performing investors and from Tiz himself. Please welcome to the stage Augustin Mojitas, portfolio manager and research analyst at Janus Henderson Investments, Dr. Roderick Wong, managing partner and chief investment officer at RTW, and to moderate, stats senior writer for biotech, Adam Feuerstein.
Thanks, Matt. This on? Yep. Hey, everyone. Ooh, that's loud. I know you guys are all here for the three of us. You're not here for Pazder, right? Yeah. You're all going to leave. They're all going to leave after we're done because they're not here for Pazder. And those lights are bright. So, as I said, Matt introduced you guys, Augustin, Rod, both biotech healthcare investors. I don't know, let's just start like day one of JP Morgan. I know I've said that we're not supposed to sort of judge the entire year by JP Morgan, but like, I don't know, how was day one at JP Morgan?
I guess I can start. Yeah, I mean, it was, I guess, a little bit underwhelming in the sense that everyone had expected fireworks. You know, there's still tomorrow. So there's still a chance. But, I think actually it kind of highlighted, why I still am really excited about the sector. I met with a bunch of our portfolio companies, many of them launching drugs, doing extremely well, developing new therapies for high unmet medical needs, and, trading out what we think are valuations that remain really attractive. So despite the lack of M&A, I'm not really that concerned about it because at the end of the day, the fundamentals of the businesses are strong. And if that continues to be the case, it'll be good for the sector. So, yeah, I don't think we can judge the whole year by just today, but I was excited just in meeting with the companies I met with.
Rod, how do you feel day one?
I totally agree. I feel like today wouldn't have felt like the letdown that it feels like if the RevMed, Abivax rumors all came out this morning, right? So I think that was the thing that killed it. But otherwise.
Yeah, and I should say, disclaimer-wise, these guys are both investors. We're probably talking about companies and stocks, like Rod mentioned, and none of this is investment advice. These guys have no idea what they're doing, so don't listen to a word. Only trade based on what you read on stock twits and X and stuff like that. Well, let's get into the M&A discussion, Rod, because you mentioned it. We have these two companies that seem to be in play. Revolution Medicine, cancer drug developer, Abivax, immunology company. We haven't seen those deals, but it seems like something is going on. And I just like a general M&A question. I know I saw you quoted in the Financial Times saying that you thought that there was going to be a lot of deal activity this year, that there was going to be a lot of competition. And I wanted to maybe elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that both of those two companies, it was just a few months ago that I think Avidity set the record for a development stage company going for $12 billion. Abivax we'll see, but obviously RevMed would be a multiple of that if that deal gets done. So I think that's interesting in and of itself. But I think everyone's seen many different versions of the LOE challenges that roughly half of the big cap pharmas have, and that's not a secret to anybody. But every day we're closer to those patent expiries. And because you saw some late-stage assets go last year, if you just walk down the list, the number is getting shorter, and the buyers are growing. I think one thing that people don't talk enough about, aside from the fact that there's a lot of patent expiries, is that the amount of cash flow that you're seeing being generated by the space is increasing, most importantly because of Novo, right, and Eli Lilly, right? So you're adding two players that are going to be generating already $15 billion in cash flow a year. Lilly will soar well past that, eclipsing J&J. And that's just an enormous amount of M&A firepower. And so, that was the reason behind my statement in the FT, is that, you just have more buyers with more capital and a shorter list of late-stage companies.
Augustin, I want to ask you, because the the reported deal for Revolution Medicine are in the $30 billion range, which would make it the largest development stage M&A in biotech. That's a big number, $30 billion for a company like that. But what does that say about just sort of generally the appetite for pharma companies to buy biotech?
Yeah, I mean, I think it speaks to the fact that they have, firstly, incredible drugs that are in development. I think, they obviously don't have the randomized study yet in pancreatic cancer, but I think it's very clear based on the data they've presented so far, the second-line data, front-line combination data, their own internal combinations, their chemo combos, et cetera, et cetera.
And these are drugs for pancreatic cancer, lung, colon cancer.
Exactly, all KRAS and RAS-driven tumors that they have, fundamentally extremely exciting molecules that will change the practice of medicine, in very important ways. And that is very valuable, and there aren't many of those assets out there. And so I think it speaks to the fact that there's already high conviction that these medicines will probably generate on the order of $5 to $10 billion of peak sales. I think we get there pretty easily in our models. We use, really back of the envelope 5x peak sales potential. So that puts you at 25 to 50. So paying 30 actually is towards the low end. Now, obviously, that's not probability adjusted, et cetera, or time discounted too much, but it's in the right range, I think. And so the question really for that company is, maybe we go at it alone and generate more value, similar to Argenx, Insmed, and other companies that have really, or Alnylam, who was just on the stage, they've reached escape velocity, and that's something that's not talked about enough either. It's not just, getting gobbled up by big pharma, it's becoming big pharma. Right? It's becoming the next Argenx, that might become the next Vertex, and then those companies themselves will do M&A. And so that's why we remain fundamentally really excited about the sector, because we don't want all these companies to get acquired. We'd rather they continue to generate value.
That's a really great point, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I actually have written, I've written about the fact that not every biotech company can be acquired. Like, we actually need to grow companies internally. They have to grow to become sort of the next Gileads, the next Amgens, the next mega big cap biotech companies. You mentioned Alnylam, maybe an Insmed. Vertex has sort of gotten there now. When you guys think about investing, how much do you think about that as a sort of a long-term goal for where you see your companies going versus investing in companies because you think they're going to get acquired? Rob, maybe talk about that.
I actually think that you guys are talking about the single most important point that differentiates the period that we're entering from the last 10 to 15 years, right? Which is that science is fascinating, but science is a means to an end so that you can have blockbuster products that fulfill huge unmet needs that ultimately support large, sustainable businesses. If we're ever not going to be kind of a niche industry, that's what we have to do. And I like to think about the fact that the list of, top 10 list of leading biotechs remained relatively static for 20 plus years, right? No matter when you started in the business or when you trained in science, the same name brands are the ones that everybody knows, right? Whether you're 50, 40, 30, 20 years old. And now for the first time, there's these brands that are also $50 billion plus market caps. You named a couple, UCB is the one other one. And then you have the ones knocking on the door, like Insmed, and then B1 is the other one that's also close, around 40 billion. And that change in such a short period of time, that awareness of that change, I think, is relatively low, right? But if you ever want generalist investors, right, the large pools of capital that are allocating to our space, to consider anything aside from tech, that's what you really need. And I think that's what we're going to get in the next decade.
Thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, I think that's what the sector needs. When we make an investment, we have to fundamentally believe the drug can, achieve, let's say, blockbuster status, or that the company can be a self-sustaining business. That doesn't necessarily mean blockbuster status. That's ideal, but a self-sustaining business. Because if we're just relying on M&A and companies that rely on getting bought, if you don't, you're in a world of pain. So I think that's definitely not how we form our investment thesis. Now, when we identify assets that are compelling and attractive and we invest behind them, oftentimes big pharma finds those assets attractive as well. And so, I think last year in our portfolio we had over 10 companies acquired. And so it's not, that's not why we're investing, but it happens. Let's just put it that way.
So let's switch gears and talk a little bit about
companies. We got to talk more, buddy.
Let's talk a little about the state of the FDA. Given that we're sort of the lead-in to the Rick Passer talk. Ryder, now I wanted to start with you because you do invest a bunch in cell and gene therapies, which has been the area that has been most volatile, sort of most impacted by what's gone on in the FDA. And I wanted to, like, what's your thinking about, you know, the current state of the FDA and like how it impacts the way you guys invest in those companies?
Yeah, it's something that we're thinking about a lot. I kind of frame it this way. On the positive column, you know, McCary has announced all these great ideas to accelerate translational development, right? Which I think, if they deliver, that's going to be wonderful. But on the negative side, I think we've seen from the actions that they've taken, basically on filings last year, that they are raising the bar for especially rare disease, and within that, of course, especially cell and gene therapies within CBER. You see it in the statistics. You know, if you look at the total number of drugs approved, overall, I think it's something like 64 total last year versus 69 the year before, 80 the year before that. Rare disease is roughly usually about a third of total approvals. But if you look at the rejection rates are up from, I think, from 23, 24, 25, 12% to 20% to, I think, 29 or 30% for rare disease applications. And that's concentrated within CBER. There were only 4 rare disease drugs approved by CBER last year.
So you're more worried about CBER with a B
Yes.
than CDER with a D?
And look, I think the actions tell you, my conclusion is that they're saying, listen, edge cases, single-arm trials, natural history analyses, we're going to hold those now to a higher standard and not accept them except in certain circumstances. And I think the net result of the positive things and the negative things is that you're going to get a decrease in innovation in rare disease. So that's not what I'd like to see. You know, I'm a big advocate for rare disease, aside from being an investor, and I think, you know, that's not great for innovation.
I mean, we had a situation this weekend today where the FDA announced this new flexible regulations when it comes to CMC for cell and gene therapies. Marty Makary announced it, and he got off the plane, did a video. But then we had the rejection of the Atara Biotherapeutics drug this morning, which, like, you know, again, it seems like, you know, one positive and one negative.
That's right. And, you know, I'll just say one more thing about that. I think in the short term, the flip-flopping, which I guess Atara would probably fall in that bucket, certainly from their perspective, that can chill investment in the short term, right? Now, in the medium term, I think if they're consistent in this new standard, people will adjust to that. But I think the bar will be higher for rare disease, and that still will mean less innovation.
In terms of the FDA, Augustine, like, what are you looking for when you think about things? You look at your investments, and like in the coming year, like, what do you want to see or not see when it comes to the FDA? Like, what are the things that we should be paying attention to?
Yeah, definitely consistency is the most important thing by far, and we definitely lack that right now. I think we saw extreme turbulence last year. I think last year, in the first half of the year, where there were so many headwinds for biotech, tariffs, drug pricing, FDA, you know, I think the first 2 of those resolved by and large, but now we still have the FDA to deal with. And I think, you know, just, you know, Vinay's on, Vinay's off, you know, he's back. It's crazy, right? Like, I can only imagine how the people that have to work at the FDA, you know, we're feeling it, and we're like quite a bit removed from it. Just imagine if you're having to work there and do a lot of work, be underpaid. It's tough, right? And so when things are constantly shifting, when there's no direction, the leadership is maybe, you know, saying great things, but you know, it's not being executed on the ground level. It's really hard for investors to then back companies, and so therefore, you know, discount rates go up, probability of success goes down, your bar goes up quite a bit. So yeah, you're going to see a shift to wherever there's stability, precedence, where there's very clear precedence for approval. Okay, you're going to get an obesity drug approved. Yeah, we know exactly how to do that. There should be no controversy. But maybe a disease where there is no treatment, therefore a high unmet medical need, gets ignored, or incrementally the cost of capital is higher because we don't have, you know.
Yeah, I think, you know, consistency is it's a key word, and I'm sure you guys hear it from CEOs that you speak to, and I do, that's what they're so worried about, that, you know, that they have to develop drugs in a way that they can go to the FDA. They know the FDA is going to act in a consistent manner, and that they can rely on what the FDA tells them. And in the Atara situation, from basically, you know, based on what they said, you know, that it was a complete reversal. Like, you know, the FDA is telling them one thing years ago, now they're telling them something else, and it sounds like that's something very difficult for companies to deal with. And I wonder, like, it must be difficult for you guys as investors to sort of deal with that kind of inconsistency.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at kind of analogs, when you had the passage of the IRA with the pill penalty in the short term, you know, you saw a 50% reduction in small molecule oncology clinical trials, right? So I think that's what you're talking about with this kind of uncertainty with rare disease, and especially for cell and gene therapy, probably something north of a 50% reduction in investment and programs in the space. So yeah, absolutely consistency from top to bottom is probably the most critical thing that we'd be looking for some progress this year.
So Augustin showed me his calendar for today, and he had like 400 meetings today, and he probably have like 500 meetings tomorrow. But I'm wondering, like what do you like? Like, what is there, like a particular company you like particularly like, or a disease area that you're most interested for 2026?
Yeah, I mean, I'll highlight a few things that we're excited about. I think we're excited about, you know, franchises that continue to grow, things like argenx, Vyvgart. We had a great meeting with them today, just firing on all cylinders. They have next generation versions of Vyvgart that'll be, you know, longer duration, going after more indications. Just a company that just kind of does everything right.
You like the CEO transition there?
It was a little bit unexpected, I gotta say, but you know, that's a very, very thoughtful company. We were reassured through our meetings with them that was the right decision at the right time, and yeah, we're really still very excited. So just those, you know, companies continuing to grow and execute, and you know, they have a ton of pipeline that gets very little credit. Other areas that we're excited about, actually Alzheimer's disease is going to have some big readouts this year with Lilly's preclinical Alzheimer's data. I think that's going to put a spark back into that disease category after kind of some tepid launches. You know, like the whole aducanumab debacle, obviously, and so I think that's exciting. There's, you know, brain shuttle companies that are in the works, you know, trying to deliver these antibodies to the brain in a more efficient way, lower doses, subcutaneous, potentially more efficacious. So I think that whole area is exciting. And then we like, you know, RNA, you know, oligo and RNAi delivery to different tissues. And so, you know, you saw Avidity was taken out. Yeah, we have an investment in a private company called Souffle that we're very excited about that's really unlocking different tissues like the muscle, cardiac muscle specifically, kidney, you know, different immune cells. And so I think you're going to see, as different tissues get unlocked, a lot of value being created. I mean, right now we've basically only unlocked, you know, basically liver and maybe muscle a little bit. So imagine as we unlock more tissue types, just how much value can be created.
Right, you mentioned cancer to me when we were talking earlier.
Yeah, I mean, in cancer specifically for, you know, small and medium-sized biotech, I think it's going to be a super active year. I was saying that before the RevMed rumors, but obviously...
Actually, we did. When we talked, it was before the RevMeds have happened, so...
But obviously, that's kind of, you know, the one you hold up. You know, pancreatic cancer will probably be transformed, but there's a lot going on in breast cancer. You know, Celcuity, we'll see with PI3K, has a lot of promise. Tons going on in bladder cancer as well, from J&J down to smaller players. You know, if I were to pick one other therapeutic area that I personally just kind of find interesting, as everybody knows, there's been a lot going on in neuropsych, but specifically within that, I think psychedelics, this is kind of the year. Compass is the first with just, you know, good old psilocybin, and you're going to see that second phase 3 if that works. That could be the first psychedelic launch, right, towards the end of the year or early next year.
That's really interesting because I feel like that's kind of that whole area of psychedelics has sort of been a little bit on the fringe, but it does feel like it's building momentum and it's sort of becoming more, I don't want to say mainstream, but it seems like it's being taken more seriously.
That's right. I mean, Spravato, J&J has shown that there's a big opportunity there with Spravato, and when you get feedback from folks and talking to patients of what they would prefer, I mean, they're really excited about psychedelics, right, for all the obvious reasons, the long history and the recreational experience and all that stuff. So yeah, I think that's going to be the start of a very big category.
I neglected to see if there's any questions from the audience, and we're blinded by the lights, so I can't really see, but Matt, are you out there? Or anyone out there with a question?
I'm actually over here.
If not, I
anyone
have
does
more
have a
questions.
question, raise a hand. Once, twice.
Let me ask you guys about, we talked about companies existing. What about IPOs? Because the IPO window has been shut.
Don't let any of them out.
So what, they seem to be, Rod, you have strong feelings about IPOs?
No, look, I think this is going to be a good IPO year. That would be my prediction. I think that's consensus, I'm sure, that the window will reopen. Just as a reminder to folks, I think a healthy IPO market is normally north of 30 IPOs per year. Last year, did we even reach double digits? I don't think we did.
No, I don't think so.
So yeah, I think this will be the first year in a while that
But is it going to be quality companies or junk companies that have been sitting there waiting to go public?
The reason I started with the joke is because I think the issue is that the line is so long of private companies, so anyone waiting for the IPO market to be kind of signal, right, that the health of biotech is back, I think shouldn't rely on the IPO market. I think the health of the biotech market is being demonstrated by what we were talking about, is that you have large commercially successful businesses coming from these late stage and commercial products. So that to me is the much more important thing. So I'm kind of ambivalent what happens with the IPO market. I do think, unfortunately for private companies, that line is so long, it's going to take 2, 3, well, probably more like 3, 4 years of a healthy IPO market to kind of clear that line.
We're going to see more crossover rounds?
Yeah, I mean, so what we
you
saw,
guys you do crossovers, don't you?
Yeah, we do quite a bit. Yeah, I mean, both our firms do. Look, I think you're going to see an active IPO market. We already saw one with Actis. It did pretty well, raised a good amount of money, healthy valuation, performed well in the aftermarket. So given that signal, I think you will see more. I think the quality will actually be fairly high. I think investors are going to be picky. I think we suffered through the consequences of not being picky. And that it took years, literally, to kind of, even we're still working through it now, but the number of public companies is down significantly. That's very healthy. So yes, I think we'll see IPOs. There's too many stakeholders that benefit from it for it not to happen. And I think there are companies that are ready to showcase what they've got. So I think I'm excited for it, but we're going to be quite selective.
What about Chinese companies listing here?
Chinese companies listing in the U.S.?
Will we ever see that, do you think?
I think right now the standard business plan, right, is to out-license to an existing or new co. And I think that's going to remain the business plan. One stat that I think is super interesting to me is that despite the fact that there are quite a number of sizable Chinese biotech companies, really only one, and then now which is B1, which changed its name from a Chinese name to a non-Chinese name, right? And then 2, Zai Lab now aspiring to potentially become a global business. Every other company is still doing the out-licensing model for the rest of the world, including Hengrui, which, by the way, is a north of $50 billion market cap company. They could easily go after it themselves. So I think that's just going to be the status quo for a while, which is that Chinese companies are going to stay focused on the Chinese market.
Do you guys invest in Chinese companies? Oh, I'm sorry, Matt. Well, we'll get to the question in a second. But do you guys invest directly in China? Is that something that you guys do?
Yeah, we will, but I gotta say, we do so cautiously because we're not on the ground. Maybe you guys have boots on the ground there, and so without being on the ground, with a big team there, we do so, but cautiously. But I agree. I think they're going to remain more the out-licensing model. And don't get me wrong, there's some incredible assets out there, and so we've backed multiple of those kind of new cos that have brought in assets from China, and they're fantastic.
Matt, were you out there?
Quick one, yes.
Hi, Al Passat, a biotech trader here. Gold prices, silver prices, copper, palladium, they're all skyrocketing right now. So are you concerned that at some point Fed needs to hike again and we live through another biotech dark winter? Are you concerned at all, or what are your takes on the macro parameters right now?
Okay, I didn't hear all of that, but it was macro rates.
It was a little
what if
muddled.
the Fed has to hike?
Okay, if the Fed needs to hike. Well, look, I think if we go through a really rapid tightening cycle like we experienced in 22, that will certainly be bad for the market. I don't see that happening. Inflation is actually quite under control, so I don't see that happening. Obviously, Trump's trying to get interest rates down. I mean, we see that. That being said, you got to keep an eye on that for sure. I don't know. It depends on the deficits. It depends on a lot of things that I'm not qualified to talk about. So, but it's not something that concerns us too much. We think the current rates are fine. I mean, it doesn't. I don't think it really affects, to be honest, the discount rates that investors use for biotech, like what the prevailing rate is. Although it just, on the margin, if rates are higher, it takes risk capital off the table. So it definitely prevents generalists from getting involved. But we're not too concerned.
In the last minute, we have what worries you the most? What I don't know if you wake up in a cold sweat, but like what in 2026, what would be bad?
I've been worrying about so many things for so many years that I'm just kind of relieved that the list of things to worry about is shorter this year than most Januaries, right? So let me enjoy that just for a minute.
I don't want to end on a down note. That's actually really bad. I shouldn't do that. We should end on a happier note.
I think if it's just FDA, if that's number one, that's a pretty micro thing. And I don't think, even in the worst case, I don't think it is going to really materially impact the total number of new drugs that you get across the finish line. It's not going to swing 20, 30%. And so from that perspective, it's okay.
Augustin, is biotech back?
I'm not going to go so far. I think I'm cautiously optimistic that biotech is
back a little, part of the way?
Yeah, it's back. It's back a little bit. Yeah, why not?
All right, we'll end it there. Rod, Augustin, thanks so much, guys.
All right,
appreciate it.
Up next, for a session with our gold sponsor, please welcome to the stage Teresa Graham, Chief Executive Officer of Roche Pharmaceuticals, and to moderate, Stack co-founder and executive editor Rick Burke.
I think this is us. Now, we're the ones you were really here to see, right? Yeah, there you go. Excellent.
So Teresa says we have to make this the most memorable, jam-packed, great 10 minutes of the night, right?
Yeah, no pressure.
No pressure. So why don't we just get right into it? Tell everyone about sort of your role at Roche and what led to that, a little bit of your history.
Sure. So I am a transplanted East Coaster. I transplanted myself first to San Francisco for 20 plus years, and then I've lived in Basel for almost the last 7. And I really grew up at Genentech. So, I started my career in the nonprofit industry, moved over, as everybody did back in the day in San Francisco, to a technology company, but then ultimately ended up as a product manager at Genentech and really found my home. And over the last 20 plus years, I've held a variety of different roles across the organization, ultimately ending up with a transfer over to Roche and to Basel as the head of group product strategy about 7 years ago, and then taking over the CEO spot 3 years ago. But more important than my biography, I think, is who I am as a person. And as a person, I am someone whose life has been impacted by cancer. I'm someone whose life has been impacted by Alzheimer's. I'm someone whose life has been impacted by cardiovascular disease. And I think, for anyone who works in our industry, the most important thing that we can remember is that we and the people we love are the patients that we serve.
Can you talk a little more about how that those experiences have sort of guided you in your role now?
Absolutely. We work in a really privileged industry when you think about it. We are at the intersection of some of the most cutting-edge science and technology that exists in the world, and the ability to actually turn that technology and that biology into medicines that can materially impact human health. But the most ineffective medicine is the one that never makes it to a patient. The most expensive medicine is the medicine that doesn't work for what that patient needs. And so, as we go through the process at Roche and Genentech of really thinking about how do we plan to bring a drug to patients, we're constantly thinking about how are we making sure that we are actually striving to meet a true unmet need? How are we raising the bar and bringing a truly transformational medicine to the world? And how are we doing so in a way that it actually gets to someone who needs it? In our industry, we talk a lot about go-to-market. In my mind, that's exactly the wrong way to think about it. We shouldn't be talking about go-to-market. We should be talking about getting to patients, because at the end of the day, that's what matters. Do our medicines actually make them to the patients that need them?
Can you talk a little about neurology and the state of play right now?
Absolutely. I think neurology is one of the most exciting areas in the field right now. When you think about the advances that we've had over the last couple of decades, things that we would have thought were almost inconceivable, the advances that we've had in places like MS, some of the earliest Alzheimer's therapies coming to market. It's an incredible time. And maybe just for the purposes of the fact that we have 10 minutes, we can zero in on Alzheimer's. Today in the world, 55 million people suffer from some form of dementia. By 2050, 150 million people around the world will suffer from some form of dementia. And Alzheimer's is the primary cause of dementia that many of these people will suffer from. If you have ever had someone in your life who has suffered from Alzheimer's, you know what a devastating disease that is. And within Roche and Genentech, we have been very focused on one single thing, which is trying to help people preserve more of who they are for longer. And through all of our development efforts, what we're really focused on is what is that intersection of being able to have an easier to perform diagnostic. How do you then couple that with a therapy that's as efficacious as possible? And how do you put technology around that, like the brain shuttle technology, to actually make those drugs as efficacious as they can possibly be? And so I think this is one of the most exciting and impactful areas that we can be focused on, because honestly, not only do we give people back and allow them to preserve more of who they are longer, think about the enormous cost to our healthcare systems around the world caring for these patients as they're living longer in poorer health, as they're coming out of the workforce earlier. We know that in wealthy countries, $1 spent on healthcare actually results in $3 generated in wealth back to that country. There's so much opportunity here, and I think we are really starting to be at that edge of making really meaningful advances.
You mentioned earlier the big challenge is making treatments available. How is Roche doing that, like getting to the patient?
So certainly we're very focused on that next generation of therapy, and obviously we have trontinemab in our portfolio that's just entering into late-stage trials, which we do believe has the potential to be the next generation of amyloid-clearing agent, likely to be highly efficacious, safer than what we have seen, subcut, which takes a huge amount of cost and burden off the healthcare system. But I think what really makes Roche unique in this setting is our ability to actually pair this with a diagnostic, a simple blood-based test that is a screen out for Alzheimer's. So when you go to your physician because you have early cognitive symptoms, you can take a test that says, yes, you should pursue more advanced testing to confirm the diagnosis, or no, you should be looking at other issues. What an unbelievable relief that is to know. And so, that very first step of just making sure, do we truly understand the problem that we're trying to solve? And are we being able to actually get the right patients into the treatment funnel so that we can actually get them the medicines that they need?
Where does partnering with governments fit into this?
It's incredibly important, because at the end of the day, most of these patients will end up being dependent on some form of government care. And so really helping policymakers understand that investing in these diagnostics, investing in these drugs early on, though it might feel like an immediate cost to the system, is in fact a tremendous savings to the system later on. Not to mention the fact that you're actually giving caregivers who carry an enormous burden in Alzheimer's the ability to remain productive in their own lives.
Can you give a specific example of sort of a partnership?
Sure. So, I mean, there have been a number of instances in other disease areas where we've really been able to work with governments. Breast cancer in Germany, where we were able to really make sure that people were getting tested and getting the appropriate treatments earlier. Again, tremendous savings back to those individual economies. But, you know, really working with your governments in individual countries and helping them understand the problem that you're trying to solve and the cost that you can actually take out of the system. There isn't anything that any one of us can do alone in our industry. It is always going to be a partnership between patient organizations, physician organizations, industry, governments, and it is that partnership, I think, that's particularly important in neurological diseases.
Is there anything that you want folks here to take away about Roche that they might not, or any misconceptions that might be out there?
So I would say if you're thinking of the Roche of years gone by, don't. We are an incredibly driven, innovative company that is looking to make massive changes in global healthcare systems. We have always been a company focused on the science. We've always been a company dedicated to ensuring that we're making those next advances for patients. But we are now looking to do it in ways that are more innovative, that are at speed, and getting to more patients faster around the world.
I gotta ask you, you were living here, as you said, for years. Now you're in Basel. Basel versus San Francisco, what's a better place to live?
I feel like people are going to get mad at me. The Bay Area.
Let's stir it up.
Yeah, the Bay Area has a number of things to recommend it, but if you have never been to Basel, if you've never been to Switzerland, put it on your list. It's an absolutely wonderful place to live. As long as you will not get Mexican food and you will not get sushi, which are the two things that I always make a point to do when I am in San Francisco. But it is a really wonderful city with a tremendous amount of culture and a tremendous amount of history. So honestly, you kind of can't go wrong. And there's direct flights.
You've got to tell people about the trash police.
Oh. So the trash collection system in Switzerland is very specific. And if you dispose of your trash incorrectly, there are people who will come, cut your bag of trash open, and attempt to identify who you are by the contents of that bag, and they will write you a ticket for how you have inappropriately disposed of your trash. So if you are not a good trash thrower-outer, then I would recommend staying in the United States.
Got it. Thanks for the advice. And Teresa, thanks so much. Really great to hear from you. I hope this was a worthwhile 10 minutes for everyone.
Thank you so much.
For our last session, I'm very excited to have joining me up here on stage Dr. Scott Gottlieb, Senior Fellow, American Enterprise Institute, and former FDA Commissioner, and so no one says we didn't point this out, a board member at Pfizer and Illumina. Dr. Richard Pazder, former Director of the Oncology Center of Excellence and former Director of the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research at the United States Food and Drug Administration. And Julie Tierney, a principal at Levitt Partners and former Chief of Staff at the FDA, as well as recently a Deputy Director at the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research at the FDA. I'm very thrilled to have these three people up here with me. Do you have your mic, Scott? You got it? Okay.
Yes.
So I am going to start with Rick.
Why does that not surprise me?
I think because you know I don't want to be torn limb from limb by the audience.
Okay.
But
and how can I dodge these questions?
I don't think you need to dodge this at all. But Rick has had an amazing career at the FDA. He was there for 26 years. He was initially known as Dr. No, but became the doctor that figured out how to get to yes, probably did as much or more for accelerated approval as anyone else. A lot of people were very happy on November 11th when we found out that Rick was going to be the head of the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research.
Perhaps not everybody.
And on December 2nd, we found out that Rick was going to retire. I wrote that that was a great thing, but I talked to somebody about this morning, Rick. I had a conversation with Albert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer, and I asked what he thought about your departure, and he said that you, Rick Pazdur, are a legend in regulatory work globally, that no matter if you're in China or in Japan, you saw what Dr. Pazdur was doing in oncology and you wanted to do the same. He was very, very good. And he said that when he saw that you had to resign, he was happy that you had joined and very concerned that you had resigned. And I think a lot of people shared that feeling. So I am wondering if you could tell us why, Dr. Pazdur, that you had to resign.
Okay. Let me start out. I knew you were going to ask this question, by the way. So,
Told you I was going to ask this question.
Okay. So I want to make a point. I have been a strong advocate for change in the agency. Julie knows this. We've had sometimes disagreements, yes. I've been an advocate for the center directors, or not the center director, or the center directors and the commissioners to institute change. I thought there was a lot of redundancy. There needed to be change for many years. And so when a new administration came, I was expecting change, okay? I knew there was going to be change. I did not try to avoid that change. I wanted to embrace the change. But as with everything, it's how you do it and when you do it, okay? It's not if the change needs to occur. And that was the major problem that I had, was how the changes were instituted. And it really comes to a point of leadership. And I have some certain principles that I have had, and I put this in the letter when I took the job to the staff. One was a leadership quality that I expected of everyone in the FDA to really do a bottom-up type of leadership, to incorporate the reviewers in really the changes that needed to be done. I'm not a person that wants to emphasize a top-down approach, but more of a bottom-up approach. In addition to that, I really wanted to respect the integrity of the system that we had from an administrative kind of structure, and also the issue of really addressing the poor morale. And really, I would say that at the FDA throughout this past year, there has been a palpable sense of anxiety, almost to a point of fear in some people, of changes and not having respect that they felt that they deserved. So that was one of the reasons I took the job as the center director of CEDAR, okay. Unfortunately, I'll just say that there were some irreconcilable differences that I had with the administrations based on my assumptions of what I wanted, based on those principles. Does that answer your question? No.
Well, we may come back to it a bit.
Thank you.
But when you talk about those irreconcilable differences, one thing that has been, and I would love to hear Julie and Scott's perspective on this, but one thing that has been a standard at the FDA has been that in the past, the commissioners and political appointees stayed out of review decisions. Scott, that was absolutely true not only during your term, but during previous times you served at the FDA, correct? Yeah. And Julie, had you ever seen?
I mean, that was a guiding principle when I was both in the commissioner's office under, Janet and Rob, as well as when I was in the center or when I was in chief counsel's office. This, you look to your political leadership to help you navigate, but the review decisions are left to the review staff in the centers.
In fact, one of the things that we did to celebrate my 25th anniversary, Scott was on a podcast, Andy Van Eschenbach, Mark McClellan, who else was there? Peggy. And I had that podcast particularly because I had a concern with the incoming administration if that wall, that firewall, was going to be maintained. And I asked the commissioners, all of the formal commissioners, what their role was in maintaining that. And I don't know if Scott wants to comment on this, but to kind of universally, all of the commissioners that were on that call or on that podcast really emphasized the need to have that firewall. And unfortunately, that firewall has been breached.
Yeah, I think I would say there's a lot of reasons why you want to respect the career leadership of the organization and also the processes that guide the decision making. But there's very sort of pragmatic and I would say self-interested reasons for it as well if you're a commissioner. And one of them is that I had a very effective cadre of center directors that I inherited from Rob Califf. They were in place when I came aboard. I maintained all the leadership inside the centers, and they were very effective at moving policy through their organizations and also solving problems within their centers. And the minute you create a perception that you're in any way undermining their leadership, you erode their ability to get things done within the center. And that is ultimately going to impair your ability to drive good policy through the agency. I think it's also very important to follow good process in all the decision making that you do. One, because it's important for morale, it's important for people who are in the line of decision making to feel empowered, that their voices are heard. Second, it maintains the integrity of the process and makes sure that you get good decision making. And it also, quite frankly, insulates the commissioner. When I was there, I can't count how many times I would see tweets from Adam Feuerstein every time there was a drug approved that was controversial saying, Gottlieb approved this drug. And everyone knew that I had nothing to do with the drug approvals because they knew that I respected the process and how decisions were made within the organization. And so it also protected the political leadership from the perception that we were somehow involved in the regulatory decision making, which we weren't. There were occasions when Janet or Peter would bring things to me. They would bring some pending drug decisions to me that they already had planned to take, but Janet would brief me before. But they were few and far between, and there were circumstances where you had controversial decisions where she knew the agency was going to come under some criticism and wanted to make sure that I was in a position to support the agency's decision. So DeSuvia was an example where
Rick,
we approved that.
I'm just looking at your face as you're listening to Scott, Rick, and I'm wondering, what are you feeling now?
What am I doing now?
Yeah.
What do you mean now?
Well, you're listening to Scott, and you look.
Oh, I'm thinking of past statements that have been made by the commissioners, okay?
Yeah.
And I remember Scott on a podium saying his job, it was an awards ceremony, saying his job was to support the center directors. I remember...
And I've heard similar things from Dr. Califf.
And I remember Dr. Califf saying during a very controversial application that he was not going to weigh in on this because he was a political appointee and he did not feel it was appropriate for a political appointee to really address a regulatory issue. Okay, so that has been established and was a well-defined situation.
And you're passionate about this, and it looks to me like you think that what has changed is sad. Am I reading that right? Am I reading your face right?
That what? That
the breach, you just said that this firewall has been breached. And
yes.
It looks to me
well,
like
I think
you're...
when one even takes a look at the voucher program, it's an eponymous title, so to speak. It's the commissioner's voucher program, okay? The commissioner is a political appointee. So by the very nature of the name of the program, there is involvement of a political person, basically, right?
And by the commissioner?
It's his program. The commissioner's voucher program.
How concerned are you about the voucher program, Julie?
I think there are a lot of open questions, right? It's a pilot program that seems to expand beyond its intended 5 or so. Now it's what, 18?
I'm assuming everyone has followed this, that this is a program by which the Commissioner's Office picks drugs that will be approved on an accelerated basis via a new pathway.
Right, right. And, 1 to 2 months, I think. The application, the criteria is pretty opaque. So that worries me as like a recovering lawyer. I like rules. FDA folks like rules. But I worry about the durability of the decisions, and I worry about the impact on other work that the agency is doing if staff are told, drop everything and start working on this application, get it done right away. What happens to the other, urgent applications that are in the works?
Scott, how concerned are you about this voucher program? I mean, what happens when drugs that are going to be given to millions of people start going through this process?
Look, I think one of the questions that is unclear from the public reporting and the information that's been put out from the agency is how the approval decisions are going to get made. It's one thing for companies to be selected by an objective set of criteria that presumably they're going to put out in guidance, because they said they're going to put out guidance for a sort of accelerated review. The bigger question in my mind is how is the ultimate approval decision being made? And if you read the recent reporting, there was particularly a Reuters article about this. It looks like the decision for the approval of products that come through this program is going to be made by a sort of council that meets in the commissioner's office that looks like it's all politically hired people or politically appointed people, because now you can objectively say the head of CBER and CDER are both political hires into those positions, and in the other people, if you believe this Reuters reporting, I have no reason to believe that Reuters misreported it, are all going to be people within the office of the commissioner. So
you would say that Vinay Prasad and Tracy Hoeg and that all of these are essentially political appointees at this point?
I think that's a fair statement at this point. I'm not sure too many people would object to that statement. I'm not sure they would object to that statement. They were hired by political leadership because of their political pedigree. I don't think that's really debatable, and I don't think it's derogatory in any way. It's just the reality of where we are right now, and the way the agency is being led. But I think the question becomes, how is that approval decision going to get made? Because if it is made by a political council, if the reporting is correct, if you're a sponsor, you really need to ask yourself whether or not you want to take an important product through that kind of a process, because things do go wrong in the post-market setting. We do discover safety issues that couldn't be evidenced by any reasonably sized clinical trial pre-approval. And in that setting, I think there's going to be a lot of retrospective review of how that decision got made, whether or not the review staff signed off on it, whether or not they were able to complete a fulsome review and do everything they felt they needed to do to complete that application and come to a point where they can make a positive decision on it. So I think this creates a lot of risk for sponsors. Some of the products, and I'll pause here, but some of the products that have been selected for the voucher program are things like generic drugs that are going to be manufactured in the U.S., things that reflect sort of administration priorities, supplemental indications on existing products in the market. I think those represent lower risk. But if you have a NDA with a novel product, a first-in-class product, I think that presents a level of risk that you probably want to be cautious about being in a position where you're going to have to answer questions later on.
Are there any specific examples that particularly
Well, I think we all
Scott?
know, we all probably have some products in mind. I don't want to get company and product specific, but I do think that this...
I mean, orforglipron is going through this program, the PCSK9.
They're both reportedly going through the program.
I think the major thing is transparency. It's just quite simple. You have a new process that is coming out. What is that process? Okay, it started out as a pilot program, and there's more and more drugs. What is the written processes that have been explained both to the staff and to the external community, basically, how the drugs are selected, who's on the panel, where the meetings are being held, why isn't it held in a public forum? I was an advocate that the sponsors should be attending some of these meetings also, and I think that's only fair. You have the review division presenting to this panel, why shouldn't the sponsor also be able to present to this panel? Here again, when I hear an application from, for example, the review division, I have a very different opinion hearing one side of the story, and sometimes when I hear the company side of the story, there's another piece of the puzzle that comes to play. So I think it's very important that this process is really transparent of who's on it. It's open to the public, or it's at least open to the FDA staff. At the present time, it's being held in a conference room that is adjacent to the commissioner's personal office. There's not enough room in that office even for the entire review staff that has worked on that application to attend this meeting.
One of the questions.
Rick, when you raised these concerns, what was the response? You must have raised them to the commissioner.
I was not asked to even comment on this program. The initial discussion of this program really occurred before I assumed the position of the CEDAR position, and we were discussed with us what products might be appropriate for this voucher program, but we had very little say as far as which products would go into the program, that's for sure.
Julie, do you think the program's legal?
Okay. Disclaimer, I'm a recovering lawyer. I think FDA has authority to prioritize its work in keeping with public health priorities, with administration priorities. I think that there are probably issues with implementation that may raise legal issues around the process, the criteria, whether it's applied arbitrarily and capriciously. I think overall, though, priority review was something that FDA came up with before it was ever put into guidance and codified in the PDUFA committee.
Yeah, but when you change how you're going to prioritize applications, you go through notice and comment. We did this with generic drugs to prioritize first-class generics, to prioritize getting more competition in the categories where there was only one generic available as a way to lower prices, but we did it through final guidance because we had to go through notice and comment. I think one of the questions that sponsors ought to make sure they have clarity on is who's going to sign the NDA package. If you're bringing a first-in-class novel product through the approval process, that's going to go through these priority review vouchers. I think you ought to be aware who's ultimately going to sign that package.
And it keeps on changing. I don't know exactly who that person is when I left. I have a sense of who it may be. It is not going to be the commissioner himself, that's for sure. The major issue, though, with this is bringing the staff into this process. And this was really a top-down decision. It did not emanate from below and being brought up. And when you are talking about review timelines, we had a lot of experience of this in oncology. The first one that we did was a MAT-NIB way back in 2002. And one of the underlying principles that I established when we started doing these accelerated timelines was that the review staff had to be comfortable that when they signed that letter or when they signed their reviews, that they did the same job that they normally would do. I told the staff specifically that I did not want somebody coming back after the fact and saying, Dr. Pazder made me do this, okay? I wasn't ready to do it. That required really a consensus in the staff that they would work together and they would have underlying different review practices that would go on as far as looking at these applications.
Are you worried that review staff are going to feel that the current CBER director or the current CEDAR director or the current commissioner expect them to approve a drug with this firewall breached? Is that, I mean, is that the core
Well,
concern?
I think that is a reason that there needs to be more and more transparency on this process, because even when you have a suggestion of political interference here, you absolutely need to have a greater degree of transparency, and these meetings really should be public meetings, let's face it.
You know, one just quick point. I think that the conversation we're having and the focus is on the wrong aspect of the whole continuum. The time is spent in development, and you know that. And there's a lot of things that you can do through regulatory reform to make the process of getting into first-in-human trials more seamless. A lot of companies are getting stuck in preclinical review to try to reform clinical trial design to make the development process smoother, to make it less episodic as you transition from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3. So whether or not it's a 2-month review or a 4-month review or a 6-month review, if it's a 10-year development timeline, it really doesn't matter that much. And so I think
The problem is the 6 months for you spend waiting for a meeting, allegedly, not the couple months at the end of the review process, is what you're saying.
Right. The interactions with FDA certainly, and the ability to get timely feedback, those are aspects of the development process that can change, but also the way clinical trials are structured, what we're demanding of sponsors. I think there's a very big challenge right now going from preclinical to first-in-human trials, where you can make some substantial reforms to that process and get that process under better supervision within the agency. That could take years off the development process. We're talking about taking a couple of months off the review process and putting the organization under a lot of strain in the process of doing that. So I just think we're focusing on the wrong end of the continuum with this whole conversation.
And remember, when these resources are being allocated, more resources to these applications that are getting this preferential reviews, they're taking away resources that would be used for other applications. And here again, I think we really needed a program, and hopefully this will be developed over time, but it should have been done at the onset of the program, of how the program was going to be laid out. What was the dispute resolution process for this program? What were these review timelines going to be? And here again, I think one of the principles, it's not about speed, it's about efficiency, and they're two different concepts, okay, that people have to understand. What is the vision of this program? What's the vision of the commissioner in his tenure here? It isn't just speed. Efficiency is an important concept because it requires people to analyze how they work and how to work more effectively. And when we did many of these reviews in oncology, we set up special templates, for example, that reviewers filled out along with the companies that prevented a lot of duplication of documentation. We started getting application or the data in sooner to allow the reviews to occur, this kind of the real-time review in oncology. So there were processes that were being set up. It wasn't just saying, okay, you're going to just review this in 2 months because I tell you you're going to do this in 2 months.
Structured review, templated review, a lot of that work is...
They're trying to import this now, what we did in oncology, to the other review divisions, but that needs to be done before these applications.
Are you worried that this system, as it is constituted, and to Rick, but then to each of you, will result in the approval of drugs that are either unsafe or ineffective that would not have passed through the system as it was a year ago?
I don't know the answer to that. Here again, I know the staff is doing the best that they could do to handle these truncated timelines. One would hope that they achieve the same level of rigor when it comes to these applications. Knowing the staff, they will do this, but it puts a great deal of strain on the staff. And here again, we're dealing with a staff that has gone through a lot of trauma in the past year, a staff that has been greatly reduced in number. And even when there are claims of hiring people and trying to get people to come to the agency, and the numbers, it's not a numbers game. The quality, or many of the people that have left were really key people that had been in the agency for many years, and we have lost many quality people, and those people are going to be hard to really make up by just hiring a large number of new reviewers. And this is particularly important because as we go into changes in reviews at the FDA using more artificial intelligence, et cetera, there's going to be a new review concept where it's not so much going to be data-driven or the reviewers just doing jump analyses and looking at data, but that's going to be done by artificial intelligence programs. But the key issue is going to be more a more qualitative review of what this means in a risk-benefit analysis. How does it fit into current medical practice? And that requires a sophisticated staff, not just a large number of people looking at data.
Go ahead, Scott.
Rick may have some more insight. I don't think we've seen enough truly novel drugs go through this process yet. A lot of the drugs that have been selected are things that were, I think, either
augmentin.
Yeah, either generics or supplemental indications. There were a few novel drugs. I don't think they've gone through yet. I would be concerned if there was a circumstance where the review staff couldn't go back to sponsors with questions on the data package because it was going to delay this sort of 2-month timeline if they couldn't go through the CMC issues. I think ultimately, they're going to render a judgment around safety and efficacy that presumably is going to be respected by those who are rendering the final adjudication of the approval. But in that process, they need to be able to go back to the sponsor and ask clarifying questions, ask for more data. And that's hard to do in 2 months or a month if that's the constraint that they're under.
And I think, building on what both of you said, I think that FDA staff are going to do the best that they can to make sure that the package that goes up for the final decision is as robust as possible and provides clarity around the decision making. But it's going to be another strain on them. It's a hard year.
We just don't know.
Rick, you keep mentioning this needs to be public. The FDA is doing many fewer of its advisory committee meetings, which you have always been a big fan of. When Dr. Califf and Dr. Woodcock were talking about how there shouldn't be votes at them, you publicly at one of our events said, well, yes, there should. You like having people vote on your decisions. It's helpful. But those panels are happening much, much less.
Well, one of the trade journals called it a collapse of the reviews.
That's accurate.
Of the advisory system. And here again, I think it is extremely important that we keep this, even when there is a perception, I want to emphasize this, of any political interference. This is even more of a reason to have a more public-facing discussion of applications. And here again, with this new process, the commissioner's voucher process, why aren't these public meetings? Why aren't they at least open to the entire FDA staff if they don't want to have a public meeting? Okay, I think the staff has every right to hear what is going on. They could learn more about the process, but to have it confined in a small conference room with a select group of people, many of them, or if not most of them, if not all of them, are direct reports to the commissioner, is problematic, okay? And especially if you do not have the right people that are the disease experts on this committee, this could lead to problems in interpreting risk-benefit analysis, et cetera. So there's many issues that have not been worked out. Right before I left, there was an announcement that the time to submission to the time of filing has been traditionally 60 days, okay? Somehow it was announced to the staff that it was going to be 1 week. Then it was, well, let's make it 2 weeks. Like, you can't be making up the rules as you go along here. It's the proverbial building a plane while you're flying it, so to speak. So these processes should be written down, codified, and then execute it, okay? You don't do something while you're building the plane. The review process and how you approve the drug, who's going to be on the console, how do you handle a dispute and a difference between the review division versus the company versus the console that's voting on this. that has not really been, I don't think, adequately explained it to the public.
We were studious about issuing GRMPs when I was there. I mean, every administration was, which are good review management practices, basically guidance to reviewers on how to adjudicate the process. So you sort of democratize these principles and make everyone aware. And it goes through, again, a deliberate process within the agency where it gets clear, people have bought in. And so those are the kinds of things that if they're going to do this, they need to back up and start implementing these.
I mean, it's change management 101.
Rick, you are also a pioneer in in approving drugs based on one clinical trial. But there was a policy that we've heard through reporting, and through Lizzie's reporting, that you didn't, I think that you didn't like, that the FDA has taken on, that now the standard will be to approve on one trial. Do you want to talk at all to why that's problematic?
Well, here again, this was in oncology where we did one trial, and there are special considerations in oncology because we usually have antecedent information in addition to the pivotal trial, so to speak. So these would be smaller trials that are done, multiple different endpoints in a randomized trial, which would give us confidence that the effect is a real effect expressed on multiple endpoints. But we were developing a whole guidance on this and discussion within the agency about the use of one trial with confirmatory evidence, okay? And I think that is the important point. And what had been kind of neglected in this initial discussion was the issue of having to have confirmatory evidence in addition to the one trial approach. Here again, what we do in oncology may not be appropriate for the approval and the safety issues of an antihistamine or something like that that's going to be used in thousands of patients with benign diseases. Our risk-benefit tolerance is much different. But in oncology, here again, we have multiple different endpoints that we use, response rates that are observed in phase 1 studies, early phase 2 studies, which would be augment the pivotal trial.
Rick, I do want to follow up on this. You are, you built something that was changing the way drugs are regulated. You were the model for approving drugs based on one trial, based on less evidence, but enough evidence, plus confirmative evidence, on accelerated approval. You mentioned Gleevec, one of the greatest drugs ever invented. You approved a lot of the greatest drugs ever invented, and you built a team and you built an office. Do you feel that a lot of what you built is being taken apart by people leaving, by the agency changing? Do you feel that you are, the great things you achieve, which I think people here in the audience want to hear about you achieving, do you feel they are being taken apart, and how do you feel?
Terrible.
I want to know how you feel.
Terrible. Okay. It's terrible to see 25 years of work dismantled. Okay. And the agency is only as good as the people that work there, period. It's not the program, it's the people. And when you have people that are leaving, okay, because they are fearful, okay, and I think this is an important point that has not been addressed by the press, by society in general, people that look at the FDA, is the effect that the initial DOJ issues occurred, then the April 1st fiascos of just laying off people. People were coming to work not knowing that their cards would get them in. The fact that after that we didn't even get an email to tell us who was left in the agency, who was dismissed from the agency, what divisions were let go, so to speak. So it was a very chaotic process. And when you have this chaos, people cannot operate in it. We have to remember that when you are doing creative scientific work, you need stability, okay, in any type of creative work. And when you do not have that stability of feeling comfortable in your job, in what you're doing, it doesn't lead to creative work. I think it is inappropriate to say that the only metric that we have to measure the FDA is whether they meet PDUFA deadlines here. That is one measure. It is a very artificial measure because you can take a dying horse, basically, and whip it to get across a finishing line. But that is not sustainable. In addition, the real work that will be needed in the agency is looking at emerging science and evolving principles, and that cannot be done by new staff that doesn't have any expertise in the field and have just come out of their fellowships. It really requires people that have had some length of tenure there. I knew things were in a great deal of problems when both of my deputies resigned, and for no reason. They were not unhappy with me. We had excellent working relationships for years, but it was the environment that was there. And you need to address this environment, and that is part of leadership. End of discussion.
You thought I assume, because you took the Cedar job, that you could be part of a solution here, or part of maybe saving a place that you love. I do want to ask again, what changed your mind? I've got some reporting here I can throw at you, but I really just, it seems like a feeling.
Promises made, promises not kept, okay?
But Rick, it's Adam. But who specifically broke those promises to you? Was it Marty Makari? Was it Vinay Prasad? Was it RFK Jr.? Like, tell us who broke the promises.
I'm not going into that, okay? That's another area for me to deal with in another forum, basically. I will just say that I feel that there were promises that were made, promises that were not kept, and I'll just leave it at that. In addition to that, I am a person that really respects other individuals, okay? That is in my DNA, and I think I could see people in the audience that have worked with me, and I think that they will recognize that that is an inherent quality that I have always had. And when I see people being trampled on, it bothers me. It really bothers me. And I have to ask myself, is this the environment that I want to work in? And that is one of the major issues that really caused me to really reflect on what was going on. We had an individual in the agency that was writing inflammatory emails.
This sounds like you're almost saying who this is, Rick.
I'm not going to say it is. You could read through the lines, okay? That were writing inflammatory emails using the F-bomb, telling people that were center directors and deputy center directors, and this is well published, that they were going to go after them, that they were going to lose their jobs if they did not play ball, so to speak. You had an email that was coming out that was leaked that had, I think, anyone in their right mind would feel were significant political overtones to it, as well as statements of deaths that were occurring with vaccines that still haven't been substantiated.
Well, that does sound like the Vinay Prasad email.
And then comments, if you don't agree with me, you just leave, basically. That is not how you treat people. It is not appropriate. It needed to be addressed. Was it addressed? No.
Did you bring these concerns to the secretary?
he knew of it. This is public knowledge, okay? This is not something that was, you guys reported it.
I was
Okay,
about to read
what
you
the
a
hell
bunch
are you
of
telling
Lizzie's.
about? You guys reported it, and also the New York Times reported it.
And the Washington Post.
The Washington Post, yes.
We give Dan his credit. And we had been told that that the commissioner's plan to remove Teresa Michelle as the head of the OTC division was a significant problem for you. Was that true?
Yes. I was not brought in on that discussion, okay, until the second day on the job. And at that time, I was told that she was going to be dismissed, and I had a big problem with it because I did not know the individual. I did not know the reason behind it, and they were interviewing 2 candidates for the job. And I was told if I wanted to interview these candidates, I could. I felt that it was inappropriate for me to not have a say in this, so to speak. And I was actually fearful that I would be held responsible for this because obviously this person reported to me and I would have to be signed off this action, and it would be very difficult for me to say anything about a person that I had never even met. Okay.
I remember when I started at the FDA, I started as a senior advisor to Mark McClellan this was back in 2003. You had just come aboard too, a little bit before me. And I remember you used to take the time to meet with me, to tutor me and talk to me about processes and the agency and the science. And I just want to say I learned a great deal from you. And we did the same thing when I came back as commissioner. You and I used to meet together. You were always candid, always blunt. I always got very direct feedback from you. And I can't tell you how helpful that was as a leader in the organization, how much I learned from you and how important that was. And you have touched the lives of so many people who've come through that organization, built their careers. It's a real legacy to leave behind.
Well, I think
Matt,
to
Matt,
continue the story on this.
Adam?
Can I ask Rick? I wonder if situations change, if something changes at the FDA, would you ever consider going back?
Would you be the commissioner?
I mean, can you envision a
Depends who's
situation
the
where you would go
president.
back? What's your answer to that? I mean, would you go back?
I devoted my life to the organization, okay? So yes, okay. I did not leave because I wanted to leave, okay? I want to make that quite clear.
So if there was a new commissioner, a new administration, somebody said to you, Rick, we want you to come back in some leadership role at the FDA, you would say yes?
I may. Okay, it depends on what that was. Okay, I love the agency. I love the work that we do, and I think all of the people that were there viewed that period of time, and I'm seeing Harpreet, who was one of my colleagues at the FDA and one of my trainees there, so to speak. We loved the time that we spent there, okay? It was a passion that we had, and it was fun to build these programs, and we had the flexibility to do it. So yes, okay, but the agency is going to change. It's not the same agency. I think one of the things that we discussed that I really would like to get across to this, because we have breached this divide of political interference, we need to take a look at where we want to go with the agency and drug development or drug approvals and drug regulation in general. And just to have another administration come back that is of a different political persuasion and say, well, let's change things back to the way they were, this is just going to lead to a chaotic situation of constant inconsistencies in approval standards, etc. What we really need to do is to take a look at the agency and make it apolitical, where we have leadership that is not appointed politically, but appointed on the basis of ability, competed, interviewed by teams that are public-facing, that have term limitations of 6 years, for example, so they do not interact with the political process. I don't think there should be another Janet Woodcock, and I don't think there should be another Richard Pastor, okay? I think people should cycle through the agency, get new ideas in. The staff will stay, but we really need to have a process that is totally devoid of politics to protect the processes that we have from political interference.
So you would prefer a system where all the center directors, all of the powerful folks in the FDA cycle through, and not on an election time frame?
On what?
Not on the time frame of
Correct.
elections.
I think they should be devoid of any political interference. They should be competed as you would. One, I think, central issue is really getting people that don't have any political agenda in all of these positions, okay? And that needs to be underscored, that they're there, people have confidence. We have to emphasize the existence of the review process and the integrity of that review process be maintained. It's not about speed, it's about the integrity, the confidence that people have in our decisions. Amen.
But
Catholic
Rick,
boy to the end.
Rick, I was just, I think that I like the folks have talked about having sort of set terms for commissioners in the past instead of, cycling through a year and a half, 2 years commissioners, because it takes a while to affect change. But I do think having a political head of the agency that serves in a protective capacity can help the agency weather storms.
Possibly, but one has trade-offs there, obviously, and we're seeing that. So I think you really should take a lesson, and I hate to say it because of what's going on with the Fed at this time, obviously, but have a process that is really trying to get away from any political interference. I really think this is a wake-up call, folks, that you really need to take a look at fundamental change here, not just have another political party come in and say, well, we're going to redo or undo what the other previous party did.
Rick, are people in the industry concerned enough about what's going on in the FDA?
No. No.
Okay. Well, we have gone a bit over. I think it was worth it.
Shit, I'm interested to see what story you're going to write on this.
I tried to throw your lifeline.
I hope the IRS doesn't come and audit me now.
Rick, no one's coming after you. I was at the CERC meeting the other day and saw Rick make some comments there, and Hal Barron, former head of drug development at GSK, and before that Genentech, and now CEO of Altos, talked about Rick being one of the people who has really done good in the world. I'm just a reporter, but the folks there thought a standing ovation was appropriate. I'm not telling you guys anything, but I do want to thank these three folks for being here and for engaging in the discussion. And I do think at the very least they deserve a round of applause.
I should have taken your lifeline.